Chapter 741 Invitation from the Stewarts. Caspian explained, "It's useless to just speculate without any evidence." He already realized that the Andrewses were related to the matter, but they wouldn't ever admit their involvement without any proof. Laina replied, "I understand. I'll continue the investigation and gather more evidence as soon as possible. Something isn't right with how the king is behaving recently. Be more thorough with your investigation. We need to find out what it is that the Andrewses have to be controlling His Majesty." "Of course. I'm on it." Caspian asked, "By the way, has Tom ever told you anything about Skyark Palace?" Laina replied, "Yes, Tom had told me about it. I believe what happened in the king's residence is related to Skyark Palace. You should keep it in mind as you continue the investigation." "I see. I will definitely get to the bottom of all of this." Caspian hung up and continued to study the Eldorian scroll fragment. There was still one technique he hadn't been able to decipher yet. At the Stewart residence the next day, Carl exclaimed, "Your 71st birthday is in 2 days, Mom. We're preparing to hold a celebration for you." Marilyn was still downcast. "Forget it. Henry had just left us not long ago. Just cancel the birthday banquet for this year." "I understand, Mom. None of us wanted to see Henry leave us like that. But celebrating your birthday is a tradition for the family. Other people might mock us if we skip out on it this year." Melinda chimed in, "Yeah, we have to celebrate your birthday, and we'll even invite both Caspian and Willow." Marilyn angrily replied, "Why invite someone so cold-blooded like Caspian? I don't want to see him. Caspian's just a civilian now. We can invite him to your birthday banquet and then humiliate him in public to vent our anger. Would he even be bothered by that? The first time he visited our house was also for my birthday banquet. And if you remember, he wasn't the slightest bit angry when we mocked him in front of everyone. In the end, it only angered us even more." Carl replied, "It's not like we can kill Caspian. We'll at least feel better after we humiliate him in front of everyone this time." Alicia felt helpless as she listened to her family discussing plans to humiliate Caspian. Marilyn replied, "All right then, do as you like." Carl replied, "Don't worry, I'll handle the planning." "Alicia, I need you to send our invitation to Caspian." Alicia was puzzled. "Why me? You're closer to him in age than any of us. It's just natural that you go. I don't see the need to invite our enemy to Grandma's birthday banquet." Alicia didn't want her family to humiliate Caspian further. She didn't want to see someone who had saved her life once to be put in such an embarrassing spotlight. Marilyn angrily asked, "What are you hesitating about?" "Fine." Alicia had no choice but to accept the task. The Stewarts soon sent invitations to every other prominent figure within South Lake City. Alicia would be heading to Riverside Villa to invite Caspian personally. Caspian was idling at home alongside Willow, who had nothing to do now that South Lake Corporation HQ was no more. Suddenly a Mercedes-Benz appeared in front of Riverside Villa. The couple walked out of the house toward the car. Willow asked, "Alicia, why are you here?" Alicia replied, "Hello, Willow. I'm here to invite both of you to the Stewart residence. Here's the invitation." "What for? Are you remarrying already?" Willow assumed that Alicia had already found a new husband after Richard was executed. "What are you talking about, Willow? Have you forgotten that it's Grandma's 71st birthday tomorrow? We're going to hold a birthday banquet for her, and we wanted to invite both you and Caspian to come." "I've already forgotten about it. But you could have just given us a call instead of coming all the way here." Alicia asked, "Do you really want to come, Willow?" Willow replied, "Of course. I'm not so cruel as to ignore their invitation after they've just gone through a loss. I'll be there. But they just intend to humiliate both you and Caspian. I don't think you should go." Willow was stunned for a moment by the fact that Alicia was kind enough to tell her the truth. Caspian was suspicious of Alicia. "Why are you telling us this?" Alicia explained, "You've saved my life once. I don't want to see the both of you being humiliated in front of everyone. I've also ordered for Henry's execution afterward. Do you not hate me?" "I do, but I also understand that you had a duty to perform as the Diaturanian god of war." "I'm glad that you understand." "Willow, I don't think we should go. I'm just a civilian now. We'll definitely just be humiliated by them if we join the birthday banquet." Willow nodded and replied, "Let me think about it." Alicia explained, "Of course, I'm just here to send you an invitation. You can take your time to make the decision. Since you're already here, why don't you come in for a drink, Alicia?" Alicia felt that it would be awkward if she accepted. "I still have somewhere to be, thank you." She felt guilty for all the troubles she had caused for the couple back then. "Okay, come visit us anytime, Alicia." "Sure, now that the two of you are free, what do you plan to do next?" Willow replied, "Not for now." Caspian had been busy with the military and the war efforts. "It's about time he takes a rest." "I see. Just don't idle for too long and become lazy, I guess." Alicia then left Riverside Villa. Willow watched Alicia leave before turning to Caspian and asking, "Honey, are we really not going?" "Alicia had even come all the way here to invite us though. I'm just an unemployed civilian now. Besides, you already heard Alicia say that the Stewarts only invited us because they intend to humiliate us in public. Why would we go to the birthday banquet when we already know we'll just be walking into their trap?" Suddenly Sherry appeared before the couple. "Mrs. Stewart Sr.'s holding a birthday banquet?" Willow couldn't decide and decided to ask Sherry for her opinion. "Yeah, the Stewarts sent us an invitation. We're currently thinking of going or not. What do you think?" She believed Sherry might know a trick or two from experience to deal with such matters as an elder. Chapter 742 Gathering of Gods. Sherry explained, "I think it would be more appropriate for you two to show up." Caspian was confused. "Why, Mom? They don't have any good intentions in mind. They're just thinking of humiliating me now that I've been deposed. They may not have their heart in the right places, but it's still an invitation to celebrate the birthday of an elder. We would be deemed disrespectful if we never show up after being invited." Willow was stunned as she realized what Sherry said made sense. Sherry continued, "I'm also going with the two of you. I've always wanted to visit your parents, Willow." Caspian explained, "Mom, the Stewarts are a bunch of vile people. You shouldn't come with us. They'll just make fun of you the entire time. I believe they won't cause much trouble for us if we were to show up with generous gifts." Willow replied, "That makes sense. They would treat us better if we show that we're sincere." Caspian helplessly declared, "Alright, fine. I'm going as well if you two insist on going." He didn't really care as he had already experienced the Stewart family's cold welcome once. Meanwhile, the armored battalion had entered Tigra. Other countries were overjoyed when they heard the news. They were starting to have other ideas now that the Diaturanian god of war had just become a civilian without an army. Byron wanted to regain his honor after he had fled his own capital. After much thought, he decided to mobilize his troops and march toward the western borders of Diaturan. Dax immediately reported the appearance of enemy troops to Balthazar. Other senior officers were extremely worried after receiving the news as well. They could always count on Caspian whenever enemies showed up. But now that he had been deposed, who else could they still place their faith in? The sudden situation at the western borders sent the nearby civilians into a panic. They reminisced about the days when Caspian was still the Diaturanian god of war, where enemies wouldn't have been so daring. Diaturan might still have its champions, but they weren't as influential as Caspian. The Andrewses were terrified upon learning that the Philrenian army was coming their way. They had just gained immense power and authority yet were already facing a crisis. Jerry had no idea what to do next. When it came to dealing with invaders, a single mistake could destroy the entirety of Diaturan. Jerry quickly discussed with Kelvin and Zane how to deal with the Philren troops. "We had just deposed Caspian from his position, and now Philren's trying to attack Diaturan through the western borders. What should we do?" Kelvin replied, "We have plenty of other talented individuals in Diaturan, Dad. The other 4 champions are also formidable generals." Zane added, "That's right. Besides, Philrenian troops are just fodders. They aren't as strong as they used to be." Jerry replied, "But the other champions aren't as intimidating as Caspian was, and that's a fact. We might not be able to win as easily if we were to go to war again. And if we don't retaliate, the entirety of Diaturan may be in deep trouble." Zane explained, "It's just Philren, Dad. Why are you so worried? Caspian had even occupied their capital once." "I know. I'm not worried about just Philren. I'm worried about other countries like Astronia and Vedesia. They might take the opportunity to launch an attack as well." Kelvin asked, "So we need to take action, right, Dad? We've only just been promoted after all. Besides, we don't really need to defeat the enemy. We just need to make sure to safeguard our borders." "What do you mean, Dad?" "We'll try to avoid war if we can by a show of goodwill to Philren." "What? Would the champions even agree to something like that?" Jerry angrily shouted, "Do their opinions matter? I'm now the trusted advisor to the king. I'm second to only the king himself. Hell, I've even had the king under my control at this point." Zane said, "But we've yet to win over the hearts of the people. What if all 4 champions teamed up against us? Don't forget about the trump card in our hands. Even the 4 champions would have to step down if the king wills it." Kelvin replied, "You're right. Not even the 4 champions would be able to do anything against the king's orders. Yes, we just have to play nice with Philren for now. If things go well, we don't have to worry about Vedesia and Astronia, given their distance from us. As for Tigra, they've long submitted to us." Zane replied, "All right then, we'll play nice with Filarin and hope that everything goes as planned." Kelvin swiftly changed the topic. "Dad, now that Caspian's all alone, do you think it's about time we deal with him? I'd rather not have to worry about our lives constantly." Jerry replied, "You can strike whenever you like, I'll leave it to you. But remember to act without exposing ourselves." Zane replied, "Don't worry, Dad. I've decided to hire the strongest fighter from Skyark Palace for the job. No one will even realize it's an assassination. We only have one chance for this. If Caspian survives, he'll definitely be way more cautious of his safety in the future." "I know. Caspian wields a diatanium dagger. Will your hired fighter be able to match him?" "The man I've hired is the head of Raging Blade, Darren Everett, himself. He wields the Black Moon." Jerry was clearly worried. "I've heard that Caspian has unfathomable strength. Are you sure Darren will be able to deal with him?" Zane simply replied, "Darren's the head of the Raging Blade, so he's very skilled with a weapon. Caspian may be the god of war, but I doubt he could actually fight against an actual traditional martial arts expert. Most rumors about Caspian's strength are just fake news, Dad." Zane then ordered Darren to bring more powerful fighters with him to South Lake City and kill Caspian. Darren immediately sprung into action without any hesitation after receiving the order. Jerry decided to ask Balthazar to hold a meeting tomorrow to discuss the matter with the Fulrenian troops at the western border. The 4 champions of Diatoran immediately rushed to Dord City upon receiving orders from Balthazar for a meeting. Chapter 743 Uncharacteristic. The next day, the senior officers of Diatoran gathered in the king's residence once more. All 4 champions of Diatoran also showed up. Balthazar asked, "My fellow men, I'm sure you've already heard that Fulrenian troops are now threatening us right at our borders. Who has a plan to defeat our enemies?" Dax spoke up. "Filarin never learns! Your Majesty, allow me to lead my men to expel the Fulrenian troops out of our country." Keith explained, "Filarin is nothing to worry about, Your Majesty. Lord Caspian had already occupied their capital once. We are confident that we can defeat them again." Benjamin chimed in, "That's right, it's just Filarin. We have nothing to worry about." Joseph commented, "We already beat Filarin to a pulp back then, and now they're back for more? We might as well take this opportunity to wipe out Filarin once and for all." All 4 champions had expressed their agreement to fight back against Filarin. Balthazar asked, "All 4 of you have made great points. Anyone else that would like to express their opinion?" A senior officer spoke up. "Your Majesty, I wholeheartedly agree with our champions. I believe we can defeat Filarin." Another officer commented, "Your Majesty, I believe that this is a good opportunity for us to strike back and destroy Filarin once and for all." Balthazar then turned to Jerry and asked, "Jerry, what do you think?" Jerry replied, "Your Majesty, I believe we should not fight back against Filarin." Everyone was surprised by Jerry's answer. They could only wonder why Balthazar's trusted advisor was the only person going against retaliation. Balthazar asked, "Your reason being?" Jerry explained, "We already have too many enemies. If we were to start another war with Filarin, then Vedesia, Astronia, and even Estria would also join in the fight to take advantage of the chaos. What do you think we should do then?" "I believe we can opt for a friendly exchange with Filarin instead." Everyone else in the room was in disbelief upon listening to Jerry's idea. "We've already defeated Filarin once. Why should we suddenly lower ourselves in front of them? This has to be a joke." "Yeah, who the fuck do they think they are? Showing them any kindness would only make them even more demanding. Is Diatoran supposed to lower its head toward its enemy? Especially to Filarin, of all things?" Balthazar declared, "Be quiet for a moment and listen to what Jerry has to say." The crowd immediately fell silent. Balthazar asked, "Jerry, please elaborate on your plan. What good will it bring Diatoran if we were to be on friendly terms with Filarin?" Jerry explained, "Your Majesty, with Tigra already an ally on our south, inviting Filarin to ally would ensure that we would no longer be surrounded by potential enemies. Vedesia and Astronia are relatively far away from us, and they would never act rashly ever again." "What you said makes quite a lot of sense. We've just recovered from a war, and our citizens had to bear the brunt of the aftermath. I believe we shouldn't start another war, and should instead seek alternatives that would benefit our people without any bloodshed." Jerry then manipulated Balthazar's thoughts once more. Balthazar praised, "I'm truly glad to have appointed you as my trusted advisor. Your thoughtful insight will be of great benefit to the citizens of Diatoran." "Your Majesty, do you agree with my proposal?" "Of course I do. Your plan is more beneficial and far-sighted. Balthazar had long lost his own ability to reason and form thoughts. All 4 champions began to panic. Dax explained, "Absolutely not, Your Majesty. Diatoran's reputation would lessen if we were to ally with Filrin. Other countries will then follow their example and bully us." Joseph chimed in, "Your Majesty, we can't show weakness to our enemies. Other countries will definitely follow suit when they see that Filrin has gained benefits without any losses." Jerry explained, "I've already thought about all the possibilities. Other countries would definitely join the fight if we were to go to war with Filrin, and Diatoran would once again be surrounded. Would you be able to deal with it then?" Benjamin was annoyed. "We wouldn't stay back and do nothing if Caspian were still here. Lord Caspian had already been deposed for disobeying His Majesty. Are you implying that His Majesty had made a wrongful judgment, champion of North Aridlands?" Benjamin was pissed, but he couldn't complain about it. "Of course not. I just feel that it's a pity. Caspian had gotten arrogant due to his achievements and no longer took His Majesty seriously. Last punishment was an appropriate one. There will be no discussion about him any further." Joseph commented, "We would have had nothing to worry about if Caspian's armored battalion was still with us." Dax added, "I think we should summon the armored battalion back to Diatoran." "What is this? Is every other troop useless except for Caspian's own men? The armored battalion has just arrived in Tigra and won't be able to return to us immediately." Keith explained, "We do have troops other than the armored battalion. We won't have to worry about other countries joining the war if we can defeat Filrin in a short enough time." Jerry replied, "That's easy for you to say. If we start another war, Vedesia, Estronia and even Estria will be back for more. Our only way out now would be to form an alliance with Filrin." Jerry then controlled Balthazar once more to speak in his favor. "That's enough from all of you. I've already decided to follow Jerry's plan," Joseph explained. "But Your Majesty, for a glorious country like ours to be lowering our heads to a small little country like Filrin would turn us into a laughingstock." Keith added, "That's right, just let me lead the charge, Your Majesty, and if all else fails, we can always ask Caspian for help." Benjamin chimed in, "Yeah, reinstating Caspian as the Diatoranian god of war would solve all our problems." Dax commented, "Caspian may have disobeyed His Majesty, but his actions were for the benefit of the country. We can always bring him back." Balthazar replied, "That's enough. Caspian already showed that he no longer took me seriously when he ignored my royal scepter. Inviting him back to his post now would be awkward and humiliating for me. I've already decided that we'll ally with Filrin." Keith complained, "But Your Majesty, you've said so yourself that Diatoran would never submit to anyone else. Why the sudden change? Killing one another for the rest of time is not the answer. We can only seek to develop and advance as a country peacefully. And remember, anyone who dares to go against my orders will suffer the same fate as Caspian." Chapter 744 Ambushed. Everyone didn't dare to speak up after witnessing Balthazar's fury. Balthazar declared, "Jerry, I'll leave the matter of allying with Filrin to you." Jerry replied, "Thank you, Your Majesty." All 4 champions were in disbelief as Balthazar remained stubborn. They were also puzzled as to why the usually tough-willed and unyielding Balthazar was seemingly behaving like a different person. Jerry realized just how much the 4 champions favored Caspian as their leader. He decided to deal with Caspian as soon as possible lest he be reinstated to his post. Meanwhile, in South Lake City, Tom and Arya were discharged from the hospital. Caspian was very grateful to Tom and Arya for saving Sherry's life. Therefore, he invited the two to his house for a meal. Miranda was also invited. Both Tom and Arya were overjoyed. Caspian might be nothing more than a civilian now, but they still treated him as the Diatoranian god of war. They happily accepted the invitation. After the meal, Caspian decided to let both Tom and Arya stay in his house for a few days, as a way of expressing his gratitude. Arya also had another objective in mind while living in Caspian's house. It was so that she could serve as his bodyguard. Caspian no longer had his armored battalion, and even Sylvia was sent far away. Besides, as a member of Task Force Rose, Arya was permitted to carry a gun. Caspian asked, "Tom, how good are you with a weapon?" Tom replied, "I'm just so-so, but nowhere close to the actual experts." "I've never seen you with a weapon though." "Well, there's way too many security checks in South Lake City. I wouldn't know what to do if I were to be detained." Caspian nodded and replied, "That makes sense, but anyway, you should still be careful of your surroundings for now. The people who failed to assassinate you will definitely be back to finish the job." Tom replied, "I know. They're after my Black Moon Technique scroll." Stay in my house for now. We'll be able to watch each other's backs. Tom didn't reject the offer. After everyone had retreated to their rooms, Caspian went out of the house to study the Eldorian scroll fragment again. But this time, Willow insisted on following him. Caspian couldn't convince her otherwise and decided to bring her along. Willow asked, "You're already plenty strong, hubby. Have you studied traditional martial arts before?" Caspian explained, "I did. I used to have a teacher who was a traditional martial arts expert." The next second, all the birds in the surrounding trees flew away. The atmosphere around the place turned unusual. Caspian felt an intense surge of killing intent coming toward him. Willow was terrified and latched onto Caspian's arm. "What's going on? Is this place haunted? We should get back inside." "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Caspian answered as he continued to scan his surroundings. In the next second, countless silhouettes appeared from all directions. Willow was terrified by the scene. She could tell that they had come prepared. Each and every one of the strangers had a weapon in their hands. Their weapons coldly glinted in the moonlight. They wore a black suit that matched their expressionless face. Their murderous intent was so potent that it had even caused the nearby temperature to drop. They were all members of the Raging Blade. When Jerry ordered Darren to assassinate Caspian, he also ordered him to bring more men as a precaution. And thus the men before the couple were all hand-picked combatants of Darren. All of them were eternal grandmasters, and Darren himself was an innate grandmaster. Darren, however, was yet to show up. He ordered his men to launch the attack as he waited for the best opportunity to land a fatal blow on Caspian. Caspian calmly asked, "Who sent you?" One of the Raging Blade members replied, "No point answering the question of someone who's about to die soon. I don't think we have a grudge with each other. So, who sent you to kill me?" Caspian just wanted to know who was trying to have him killed. The man replied, "I'll only tell you when you're about to die." Caspian smiled. "I'm actually afraid that you might not have a chance to tell me before you die." "Ridiculous. Who do you think you are?" Caspian was annoyed. "Enough nonsense. Just come at me already," Willow shouted. "Be careful, Caspian." "Don't worry, I'll be fine." The cold steel on the enemy's hands glistened. Caspian was surprised as he realized that his opponents seemed to be powerful. Their weapons were also intricately crafted masterpieces. Caspian realized that they attacked in patterns, showcasing great teamwork. He couldn't help but feel pressured. Caspian had dealt with his fair share of traditional martial arts experts, but he could tell the opponents before him tonight were different. He decided to use his full strength to deal with the assassins swiftly. Caspian scooped up Willow by her waist to evade some of the enemy's attacks. The missing attack left a deep crack in the ground instead. Caspian and Willow could have been shredded into pieces if they hadn't dodged the attack. The men continued their pursuit. Caspian didn't want to waste any more time. He held onto Willow with one hand while skillfully wielding the diatanium dagger on the other. Several assassins were defeated the moment Caspian brandished his weapon. The true power of the diateranian god of war wasn't comparable to mere eternal grandmasters. However, the assassins remained calm even as their comrades fell one by one. They still had plenty of time to continue the hunt as Caspian no longer had any men by his side. Caspian continued to fight back against the assassins with his weapon in hand. The Raging Blade men's weapons that touched the diatanium dagger were all cut into two clean halves. Caspian was definitely more than capable of dealing with these assassins alone. But he had to be extra careful as he also had to ensure Willow's safety. Meanwhile, back in Riverside Villa, Tom was suddenly woken up from his sleep. He began to hear the commotion coming from outside the house. Tom had no idea what was happening, but he still picked up a weapon and rushed out of his room immediately. Arya, too, was also woken up from her sleep. She had also noticed that something was wrong. Chapter 745 Black Moon Technique. Tom and Arya were completely awake as they rushed out of their rooms. The two of them met up in the living room. "Tom, you're awake?" Arya was surprised to see Tom coming from his room with his weapon in hand. Tom replied, "It sounds like something's happening behind the house. I was just about to go and check. It might be assassins coming after Lord Caspian." Tom nodded and replied, "I think so as well. We should go and see what's happening." He also thought that it was probably assassins coming after Caspian. Arya and Tom ran toward the back of the house without any hesitation. Meanwhile, behind the house, Caspian held tightly onto Willow's hand as he faced off against the assassins. He continued to wave the weapon in his hand. The assassins coming after him were shredded as if they were made out of paper. Caspian continued to kill his pursuers with his trusty diatanium dagger. Right when the couple was about to escape, Willow suddenly tripped over a stone and fell to the ground. She then shouted, "Just go, Caspian, forget about me." Willow knew she was only dragging him down as Caspian had to keep her safe. Any longer, and both of them might be in danger. "Willow, I would never abandon you," Caspian explained as he picked her up. The raging blade men began to encircle the couple once more. Flashes of cold steel rushed toward the couple. The situation had turned dire for Caspian and Willow. Caspian could have easily taken out all of these assassins if he were alone, but having to protect Willow at the same time made it much more difficult. Willow was so frightened that all she could do was hug Caspian tightly with her arms. The hug was the only thing left that made her feel safe. Caspian continued to wield his weapon and fight off the assassins. The men's weapons were reduced to mere toys when they clashed with the diatanium dagger. Caspian managed to escape from the encirclement with Willow in tow. The men were surprised. They never expected Caspian to have such a powerful weapon. Caspian made a big swinging motion with the diatanium dagger and sent out an arc-shaped shockwave. The men were all knocked away. They began to wail in agony, and some of them even had their arms cut off from the shockwave. Caspian landed on the ground with Willow in his arms and hit the ground running. But holding Willow in his arms had slowed his movements. The assassins launched another strike as they intended to kill the couple right then and there. Willow was so frightened that she closed her eyes. Suddenly, sounds of metal clashing could be heard nearby. Following suit were miserable screams. The men who were trying to attack Caspian were shot and fell to the ground. The other assassins were startled and took a step back. Arya shouted, "Lord Caspian, I'm here to help!" Both Caspian and Willow turned to face the direction of the voice. They saw that Arya and Tom were running over to them with a gun and a machete in hand. When Arya saw that Caspian and Willow were in danger, she opened fire at the enemy without hesitation. The men were so focused on Caspian that they never even noticed that his allies had arrived. Thus, they were caught off guard and got shot without even getting the chance to react. They took a second to snap back to their senses. The raging blade men immediately regrouped to organize a counterattack. They split into two groups, one to continue pursuing Caspian, and the other to fend off Arya and Tom. Arya opened fire as the assassins rushed toward her. The men were prepared to block the bullets with their weapons this time. Arya was surprised that they were skilled enough to do so. Given how fast a bullet traveled, it was apparent that the assassins were highly trained individuals. "Leave them to me, Arya," Tom declared as he rushed out with his machete in hand. Arya took a few steps back. Tom had mentioned how skillful he was with a weapon back in the hospital. She wanted to see for herself if he had been lying or not. Tom had rushed into the fray in an instant. He then displayed his prowess of the Black Moon technique on the assassins without any mercy. Blood spewed into the air as limbs were cut clean off their bodies. Plenty of the raging blade men were also beheaded by Tom's attack. The entire area began to stink with blood. Arya was at a loss for words from how shocking the scene was. She didn't even get to see Tom's techniques clearly. All she could tell was that the assassins were knocked down by his blade. Arya was skeptical when Tom mentioned his expertise with the Black Moon technique. But now she wholeheartedly believed his claims. It was apparent just how powerful the Black Moon technique was. Arya was very impressed and surprised by Tom's weaponry skills. It was also the first time Caspian and Willow had seen Tom fight. Caspian was genuinely surprised by Tom's strength. He realized that Greenton's Black Moon technique also seemed to be a formidable ancient martial art. The raging blade men were known for their superb weaponry skills, but even then, they only had a standard mastery of their tools. Meanwhile, Tom wielded his weapon complemented with the Black Moon technique and easily defeated them. Meanwhile, the split group of assassins were closing in on Caspian. Caspian fought them head-on without worry since Tom's and Arya's arrivals had helped ease his burdens. He could deal with them easily, even with Willow in his arms. Arya opened fire without hesitation as she noticed that Caspian was in danger. Some of the men pursuing Caspian were shot and fell to the ground. The assassins were furious and decided to split up once again to deal with Arya. Arya didn't have much ammo left and had to make each shot count. Tom noticed that Arya was being targeted and decided to help her out. The simple blade within Tom's hands was able to dish out immense damage. The assassins were already shredded into pieces before they could even get close to Arya. Chapter 746 Two Targets at Once. Meanwhile, inside the Riverside Villa, Zoe, Sherry, and Miranda were all woken up from the commotion outside the house. They all had gotten up from their beds and went to the living room. "What's going on? Why do I hear gunshots coming from the back of the house?" Zoe asked in a panic. Miranda replied, "It sounded like a fight." Sherry asked. Where's Caspian and Willow? Are they still asleep with all the noise? I'll check, Zoe replied as she ran to the couple's bedroom. Sherry and Miranda followed after her. They saw that the bedroom door was open and that Caspian and Willow weren't inside. Zoe shouted, "This is bad. It might be Caspian and Willow out there right now. Maybe they're being attacked by assassins," Sherry replied. "We need to go and check," Zoe nodded. Miranda explained, "Wait for me. I'll go and wake up Tom and Arya. Maybe they can help." She thought that Tom and Arya might help Caspian fight off the attackers. Sherry and Zoe knew that Arya and Tom were probably the only people who could help Caspian out there. As they ran to the guest rooms, they were surprised to find that both Tom and Arya were missing as well. Miranda explained, "They're not here either. Maybe they're already outside. Let's go." The three women arrived at the back of the house and saw everyone else locked in combat. It was an extremely chaotic scene to witness. The raging blade men littered the area with blood and all sorts of body parts that were cut clean off. Sherry, Zoe, and Miranda were terrified. Caspian was annoyed and worried that the three women had come out of the house. Their arrival had only served to add additional problems for him. It would be extremely dangerous if the assassins turned their attention to them. Suddenly, a sinister voice rang out from behind a thick tree. "That's enough. I'll deal with them myself. Caspian, everyone praised you for being invincible. I'll have to see for myself if that's true." The sound of his voice sent chills down everyone's backs. Caspian was surprised upon listening to the voice. He realized that the voice belonged to Darren, the head of Raging Blade. Everyone stopped fighting when they saw Darren coming out from behind the tree. Darren wore a black robe and carried a weapon as tall as he was. Tom was shocked as he saw the wide, blade sword in Darren's hands. It was none other than Greenton's treasure, the Black Moon itself. Tom also recognized Darren. They had once met when Greenton was wiped out back then. Tom's father had also died at the hands of Darren. As a result, he bore a grudge against Darren. Darren had been hiding himself, wanting to see Caspian's strength. He felt that Caspian wasn't as strong as the rumors claimed him to be, as he would have probably been defeated if not for Tom's help. Tom's and Arya's appearances had also resulted in half of his men being killed. Darren decided that he had to step in to finish the job. Caspian had seemed like he was having a hard time earlier because he was holding on to Willow with one hand and couldn't showcase his full strength. Caspian asked, "Who are you?" He could tell that the weapon in Darren's hands was special. Tom explained, "Lord Caspian, he's the head of Raging Blade that's part of Skyark Palace. He's also hugely responsible for the annihilation of Greenton." Everyone was surprised by the reveal. Caspian nodded his head and replied, "No wonder. I guess that's why they're all so skilled with a weapon." Tom added, "That's right. The weapon that Darren is holding on to right now is none other than Greenton's treasure, the Black Moon." Caspian was shocked. He had felt that the weapon was special, but he never expected it to be such a treasure. Caspian took a good look at the weapon and realized that there was an image of the moon engraved onto the blade. Darren smiled. "I never expected that you'd be together with Caspian, Tom. Lucky me, I get to deal with two of my targets at once." Tom angrily shouted, "I swore to take revenge for every member of Greenton, Darren. I'll be killing you tonight and avenge my father." "Ha ha. Who do you think you are? Not even your father could defeat me. What makes you think you can do it now?" Tom understood better than anyone that he wasn't a match for Darren. But he was too blinded by rage and vengeance to consider the difference in strength between them. Tom replied, "So what if you have the Black Moon itself? The Black Moon technique is still way more powerful than your techniques." Darren was furious. "You imbecile! Did you just say that my technique is weaker than yours? You dare make such claims when I've already killed your own father? Enough nonsense! My father only lost to you because he was outnumbered. If you were to fight him one-on-one, you would never be a match for my old man." Darren's expression turned sour as he knew that Tom was right. He was only able to kill Kale because the latter was outnumbered. "Where's the Black Moon technique scroll? Give it to me now and I'll spare your." Darren might have the Black Moon, but its power was greatly reduced without the technique to match it. Tom shouted, "In your dreams! There's absolutely no way I would give you the scroll." Darren threatened, "Aren't you afraid that I will kill your woman?" Miranda stepped forward and replied, "Don't worry about me, Tom. I won't let someone like him catch me. Let me test your strength as the leader of Raging Blade," Caspian shouted as he rushed toward Darren with his diatanium dagger in hand. Darren immediately sprang into action as Caspian rushed forward. He had always wanted to fight Caspian ever since he heard that Robert and Victor were killed by Caspian. Very well, I too wanted to test the strength of the legendary Dieteranian god of war. I don't think we have any grudges between us in the first place. I want to know who sent you after me. Darren explained, I'm just following orders. Caspian asked, who's the mastermind behind all of this? Chapter 747 Killer Move. Darren wasn't stupid enough to actually come clean to Caspian. You don't need to know. He was also confident he would be able to beat Caspian. He would also be immensely disappointed if Caspian were to flee at any point during their fight. Enough nonsense. Let's fight! Caspian shouted as he rushed toward Darren. Darren rushed toward Caspian as he swung the black moon. He could tell that the dagger in Caspian's hands was special as well. Darren thought about retrieving the weapon after the fight was over since he also needed a weapon for close combat as well. Tom and Arya immediately ran to Willow's and Sherry's sides. Being near them would make it easier to protect them. The raging blade men were all focused on the fight between Darren and Caspian. Darren gathered and poured all of his energy into the black moon. He then swung the weapon at Caspian without holding back. The swing shot out a shockwave that chased after Caspian. Caspian was somewhat at a disadvantage against such a large weapon. The two of them finally clashed as the crowd watched in anticipation. Willow and the others were extremely nervous, worried that Caspian might not be able to win. Even Tom was silently praying in his heart. But luckily Darren hadn't yet learned about the Black Moon technique. He would be truly unstoppable if he coupled the techniques with the Black Moon sword. Just when everyone thought that Caspian might not be able to win, a shocking scene unfolded before them. The diatanium dagger in Caspian's hand glistened in the moonlight. And Caspian's shadow seemed as if it was turning into a demon. His presence and murderous intent exploded in an instant, causing Darren to panic. Darren realized that Caspian now was on a completely different level from just a second ago. He could only wonder if Caspian had been hiding his true power. It was too late for Darren to think about the details. He had to give his full attention to defeating Caspian. Everyone held their breath as they looked forward to their next clash. Willow and the others could only watch and silently pray for Caspian, as they couldn't provide much help. The raging blade men were anxious. They realized that they might not make it out of there alive if Darren lost the fight. The next moment, Caspian's diatanium dagger clashed with Darren's black moon. The sound of weapons clashing rang out. The two powerful blows colliding sent out an even bigger shockwave. The shockwave spread far and wide and even caused the river behind the house to ripple wildly. Darren took a few steps back before barely regaining his balance. It was a pity that Caspian's weapon was merely a dagger. Had it been a bigger sword instead, Darren would have been sliced in half. Darren was also an experienced fighter who wouldn't be easily killed by Caspian. But their previous clash had made him realize Caspian's true strength. He felt that Caspian was much more powerful than he expected. Darren didn't dare to play around any further. Any careless mistake now might cost him his life. He composed himself before launching another strike at Caspian with a raging blade technique. A ray of light dragged along the wind to form a shockwave that went after Caspian. The black moon seemed like a giant dragon intent on devouring its prey. Tom and the others were sweating profusely. They were all frightened by Darren's sudden display of strength. However, Caspian remained calm and collected. He knew better than anyone else that he was stronger than Darren, but he was at a slight disadvantage due to the size of his weapon. Caspian brandished his dagger and rushed toward his target. Another powerful shockwave spread out across all directions. Willow and the others were sent a few steps back from the powerful shockwave. Darren never expected Caspian to have hidden such immense strength. He was an innate grandmaster, yet he couldn't even gain any significant advantage over Caspian. This was impossible unless Caspian's strength was even beyond that of an innate grandmaster. Darren didn't dare to think about the possibility that Caspian was at the level of Supreme Grandmaster, which was almost mythical. Caspian was only in his 20s and was already so powerful. Darren wouldn't believe it. He turned to his men and shouted, "What are you guys standing around for? Go and deal with the rest of Caspian's friends." Darren suddenly realized that he didn't have to fight Caspian one-on-one as he had brought a lot of his men with him. With Caspian occupied, Darren decided to send his men to deal with Caspian's unprotected family and friends. The raging blade men immediately acted upon Darren's orders. They were hesitant to fight Tom again, but they also didn't dare to disobey Darren. They were also less worried as they had the advantage in numbers. "Miranda, get Willow away from here, I'll hold them off," Tom shouted as he ran out to face the men. He didn't want them to distract Caspian. Miranda nodded her head. She realized it would be better to bring Willow back inside the house than staying around. As for Arya, the task force Rose member wouldn't just stand idly by as the enemies came after her friends. She wielded a gun and fought alongside Tom. Tom swung his weapon to keep the enemies at bay and prevent them from getting anywhere near Willow. Darren continued to fight Caspian. The sounds of metal clashing rang out through the entire place. The Black Moon was much more powerful than Caspian had expected. His hands felt numb whenever he guarded himself from a strike of the sword. Caspian realized that he shouldn't drag the fight any longer and decided to try out a move he had learned from the Eldorian scroll fragment. He seemingly turned into a phantom as he rushed toward Darren. Darren could tell that Caspian had brought out even more of the strength that he had been hiding. The next move coming from Caspian was far stronger than anything else he had seen today. Willow and everyone else were stunned to see that Caspian was becoming even stronger. Everyone held their breath in anticipation as they stared at Caspian and Darren. They were all looking forward to the outcome of the fight. Tom was filled with admiration as he realized just how powerful Caspian was. He realized that the skill gap between Caspian and himself was still very huge. As the head of Raging Blade, Darren's weaponry skill was outstanding. He had assumed that he could easily deal with Caspian. He realized his mistake when he saw that Caspian's true strength was beyond his wildest imagination. Willow and the others began to pray for Caspian. They thought that the fight between Caspian and Darren was still ongoing. Caspian's whole body suddenly disappeared into thin air. The next second, he reappeared right behind Darren. Chapter 748 Cleanup. Nobody could tell what technique Caspian had just executed to be able to disappear and reappear right behind Darren. The Raging Blade men shouted, "Watch out! Behind you!" Darren was still stunned by the fact that Caspian had disappeared right in front of him. It turned out that Caspian was already behind him. Darren turned around and blocked Caspian's attack with the Black Moon. But he didn't have enough time to prepare to deflect Caspian's attack. As a result, the Black Moon couldn't block the attack fully, and the recoil hit Darren himself instead. The Black Moon itself weighed 200 pounds. Darren was unable to handle the sudden recoil from the weapon. Darren staggered and almost fell down, but he still held tightly onto the sword. He had only gotten the sword after an arduous fight back then. Without it, he wouldn't be able to hold himself against Caspian. Luckily, the back of Caspian's dagger was dull, or Darren might have already died. Everyone else was shocked by the scene unfolding before them. Willow and the others could finally relax after they saw that Caspian had gained the upper hand. Although Caspian's titanium dagger was significantly smaller in size, he still managed to defeat the head of the Raging Blade. The Diaturanian god of war truly deserved his reputation. The Raging Blade men were still in disbelief. Darren was kneeling on the ground. He raised his blade and drove it into the floor to steady himself. "Sir!" the men shouted as they went to help Darren up. Caspian and Tom didn't intend to stop attacking even when Darren was already injured. It was the perfect opportunity to lay down the pressure. Tom wouldn't just let Darren get away since he wanted to avenge Kale. Arya remained by the women's side to prevent any accidents from happening. The women knew it was best for them to stay where they were. They wouldn't be able to provide much help. The best they could do was not to cause trouble for Caspian. "Retreat!" Darren shouted the moment he saw Caspian and Tom coming after him. The battle had left him seriously injured. It was impossible for him to continue fighting Caspian at this point, and the only option left was to retreat. Darren already realized that he wasn't a match for Caspian. The gap in power between the two of them was way too big. He realized that Caspian might actually be a supreme grandmaster. Darren trembled at the thought of a man in his 20s already being a supreme grandmaster. It only strengthened his resolve to obtain the Black Moon technique scroll no matter what. He needed the skills to match the Black Moon itself. The sword would just be a regular weapon without the proper technique. Darren decided to retreat for now and come back to challenge Caspian again, after he had acquired the Black Moon technique scroll and learned its secrets. The Raging Blade men had lost all motivation to fight upon receiving the order to retreat. They immediately dispersed across all directions. Darren was furious as he watched his men scurry away like rats, but he also didn't dare to linger around any longer. He immediately pulled the Black Moon out of the ground and fled the scene. Darren might have been seriously injured, but he still had enough strength to flee. Caspian chased after them when he realized that Darren and his men were trying to get away. He decided it would be best to kill them right away, even if he couldn't capture them in time. Caspian's pursuit struck even more fear into the already frightened men. They had become living targets that couldn't even retaliate against Caspian. Caspian swung his dagger again and again, and countless raging blade men met their demise. Darren immediately jumped onto a tree. He was terrified and wanted to escape as soon as possible. Tom had also joined Caspian in the chase. He wanted nothing but to kill every single one of the raging blade men. Tom displayed his prowess of the Black Moon technique as he vented his frustrations onto the men. The stench of blood filled the air as Tom massacred them. He continued to kill every single one of his enemies until none remained. Caspian chased after Darren but eventually lost track of his target. He silently praised Darren for being able to slip through the cracks. Caspian eventually gave up and turned around to go back home. When he reached the house, he saw that Tom had already killed all of the raging blade men. Tom was understandably furious as he killed them all to take revenge for his father. Caspian asked, "Why didn't you keep one of them alive?" Tom replied, "The raging blade wiped out Greenton and killed my father. Why would I spare their lives? We could have extracted some information about their mastermind if you had kept someone alive. Killing all of them had also severed our chance at obtaining any clues. I'm sorry, Lord Caspian. I was." Tom was blinded by vengeance and didn't think about such matters. Caspian waved his hand and explained, "Never mind, we can always look for other clues. Besides, Darren already escaped." Tom asked, "What about the Black Moon?" "It's still with Darren." "I see. It's really unfortunate that my family heirloom ended up in his hands. If only I could get it back, I would definitely get even stronger. The Black Moon is indeed a formidable weapon. Don't worry, I'll help you get it back." Tom replied, "Thank you, Lord Caspian. We're lucky that Darren doesn't know anything about the Black Moon technique, or he would be invincible with the Black Moon in his hands. I only hope that we can catch him as soon as possible." Caspian explained, "I didn't expect that he could still run away despite his injuries." Willow and everyone else soon approached the two of them. At this moment, the ground was littered with corpses. Arya was already used to seeing such sights. However, Sherry was terrified by the gruesome scene. Willow ran up to Caspian and asked, "Are you okay, hubby?" Caspian replied, "Don't worry, I'm fine." Arya then stepped forward and asked, "Lord Caspian, what should we do with all the bodies?" "Call the Inspector General and have her deal with it." "Are you sure? What if she gives you trouble for what happened tonight?" Chapter 749. The Truth. Caspian explained, "She won't. We retaliated to defend ourselves. Besides, we can also have Joey declare Darren as a wanted criminal." "I see. I'll get in contact with Miss Sanders right away," Arya replied and pulled out her phone to call Joey. Joey was just about to go to sleep when she received the call. She then immediately summoned her men and headed toward Riverside Villa. She didn't know what happened at the villa, but she really wanted to go there as she hadn't seen Caspian for quite some time. Joey wanted to visit Caspian and check on him. Although Caspian had been deposed to a mere civilian, Joey still held him in high regard. Caspian had helped her a lot. She even owed her position as Inspector General to Caspian's help. Joey was the type of person who always wanted to repay others' kindness. She soon arrived at Riverside Villa with her men. Joey asked, "Are you okay, Lord Caspian?" She was more concerned about Caspian's safety than the issue at hand. Caspian replied, "I'm fine, and you can just call me Caspian. I'm just a civilian now. You've made great contributions to Diatoran. I don't care what others say, you'll always be that Diatoranian god of war in my heart." "That's enough flattery, Joey. I actually called you to ask for your help to arrest someone." Joey asked, "Sure thing, but may I ask what's the deal with all the bodies on the floor? Who are they?" Caspian explained, "They're the members of Raging Blade." "Raging Blade? Is that some kind of organization?" "Yes, and they're here to assassinate me." "What kind of grudge do they hold against you to do this?" Joey knew Caspian wouldn't lie to her, but she was genuinely curious as to why Raging Blade was trying to kill Caspian. Caspian replied, "They're here on someone's orders. I still have no idea who it is, but I believe it's closely related to Skyark Palace." Joey was utterly confused. Skyark Palace? Is that another organization? Skyark Palace is a rather secretive organization consisting of many traditional martial arts experts, and Raging Blade is just one branch of it. I never knew there were so many hidden traditional martial arts organizations in Diatoran. But you're just a civilian now, so what do they want from you? "They're trying to get rid of me when I'm at my most vulnerable." "Could it be Jerry? I've always heard that there's a conflict between you two." Caspian explained, "Don't say something like that without any clear evidence." Joey nodded her head and replied, "You're right. I'll try to investigate the matter. Caspian then described Darren's appearance to Joey before issuing his orders. Joey, have your men clean up the place for now. He actually wasn't expecting much from the Inspector General's office. Caspian believed that he needed the help of Task Force Rose. Joey asked, "Huh? Cleaning up bodies again?" She more or less figured out her next task the moment she saw the littered floor. Joey had been constantly cleaning up bodies ever since becoming the Inspector General. Caspian replied, "Of course. Who else do you think will be doing that?" "Alright, fine. I'll have my men clean up the area. Then, I'll name Darren as a wanted criminal." Caspian then brought Willow and everyone else back inside the house. The next day, everyone slept in until noon after what had happened last night. Willow asked, "Hubby, what kind of gift should we bring when we visit the Stewarts?" Caspian replied, "Anything's fine, really. You can decide. I think we should get something cheaper, considering we both are unemployed right now." "Sure. I just think we'll be humiliated no matter what we give them either way." "Will they be ruthless? Probably not, right?" The couple got up from the bed and met up with Sherry to pick up the gifts. Meanwhile, at Dord City, Logan guarded 10B Passage and helped Caspian rescue Balthazar. Following his achievements, Balthazar reinstated Logan to his post and allowed him to return to Dord City. Denzel suddenly said, "Sir, we just received news that assassins had gone to South Lake City to attack Caspian last night." Logan hurriedly asked, "What? Is Caspian okay?" "Caspian is unharmed, and all of the assassins were killed." "Who are the assassins?" "They're all Raging Blade men. The Inspector General of South Lake City already named the head of Raging Blade, Darren, as a wanted criminal." "Raging Blade? Why would they want to kill Caspian?" Denzel explained, "I'm not sure, but it would seem that Caspian had relations linked to traditional martial arts. I have no idea why the assassins had caused such a scene though." Logan thought about the matter for a while before replying, "Something's fishy about this. I believe they're just trying to kill Caspian now that he's vulnerable. They want to make sure he can't return to his post as the Diaturanian god of war." "That makes sense. But sir, who could hold such a grudge against Caspian though? Just think about who would benefit the most with Caspian out of the picture. It's probably Jerry behind all of this if you ask me." Denzel was horrified. "But Jerry is now the trusted advisor to the king. If he really wanted Caspian gone, that would mean Caspian is in huge trouble." Logan explained, "That's right. Now that Caspian had lost all of his troops, Jerry could easily trap Caspian. Should we help Caspian?" "Of course, send some of our men to South Lake City to protect Caspian at once," Denzel explained. "But Caspian ignored us the last time we tried approaching him. I'm afraid he might send us away," Logan explained. "Then, we just have to protect him from the shadows." "Sir, why don't you tell him the truth? I believe he would finally recognize you if you did. It's been such a long time. Caspian wouldn't easily forgive me even if I told him the truth now." Chapter 750 To acquire the Black Moon Technique Scroll. Denzel explained, "You had your reasons, sir. I'm sure Caspian would understand if you tell him everything." Logan replied, "We'll talk about this some other time." The Masseys had offended a big shot working directly for Balthazar back then, causing the family to be branded as traitors. Logan tried to send Caspian away as he deemed it too dangerous for him to remain by his side. On the way, he was ambushed by assassins and had lost Caspian amidst the chaos. 20 years had passed since then. Sherry never understood Logan's actions and left his side out of anger and feeling betrayed. Afterward, Balthazar investigated the matter and cleared the Massey's name. But Caspian was already nowhere to be found. Logan never gave up on searching for Caspian ever since. He was overjoyed when he finally received confirmation that Caspian and Sherry were alive. Logan believed that he could still reunite his family. He wanted to visit them at South Lake City, but was too embarrassed to face Sherry again after his mistake. Denzel explained, "Sir, it's been 20 years. If you continue to hesitate any longer, Madam Lynch and Caspian may never return." Logan replied, "It's been 20 years, huh? Well, a day or two isn't much of a difference then. I believe this is the perfect opportunity to restore your relationship with Caspian." "Why do you think so?" "Caspian's just a civilian now, remember? If you reach out and help him now, he will surely forgive you." "That makes sense." Denzel continued, "Let's go to South Lake City already. Caspian's the Diaturanian god of war, a 1 in a billion talent. I'm sure he will be restored to glory soon." Logan asked, "But I need a good reason to show up at their house, don't I? I just received news that today is Mrs. Stewart Sr.'s birthday, so Caspian and Ms. Stewart will be at the Stewart residence. You can show up to pay the Stewarts a visit as an excuse to see them." "Very well." Let us prepare a generous gift before flying to South Lake City. It had also been 20 years since Logan had last seen his wife. Denzel replied, "Yes sir, I'm on it." Logan was extremely excited as he would finally be able to see Caspian and Sherry tonight, but he was also feeling rather anxious because he knew Sherry wouldn't ever forgive him. Meanwhile, at the Andrews residence, Kelvin complained, "Our plan failed, Dad." Jerry angrily asked, "What happened? Didn't you say the men you hired from Skyark Palace could kill Caspian? Why did they fail? I've even hired Darren, the head of Raging Blade, for the job. He even brought out his prized weapon, the Black Moon. And yet, he still lost to Caspian. Is Caspian really that powerful?" "Yeah. Darren's an innate grandmaster and he still lost to Caspian. Caspian's strength is truly unfathomable." Jerry yelled, "Not even an innate grandmaster could kill Caspian. Just how powerful would a man in his 20s be?" Kelvin explained, "The Raging Blade prides itself on their weaponry skill, but Darren only had the weapon and no technique to match it. As a result, he couldn't defeat Caspian. That's enough. I don't really care about their excuses. What happened to all the assassins sent after Caspian? All of the Raging Blade men were killed. Only Darren managed to escape. Did Caspian keep any survivors? No, he didn't. Besides, South Lake City's Inspector General had also declared Darren as a wanted criminal. Jerry ordered, "Tell Darren to keep a low profile for now. We don't want him getting caught." Kelvin replied, "I understand. I'll have him stay with the Skyark Palace for now. The longer we keep Caspian alive, the higher the risk of his return. We need to get rid of him as soon as possible." Jerry still felt restless even after his entire family rose to power. Kelvin replied, "I'll arrange for more assassins to deal with Caspian. I guarantee they will succeed," Jerry explained. "Don't act rashly just yet. Caspian will surely be extremely cautious. It'll be difficult to deal with him now. Don't worry, Dad. This time, I'll send 3 innate grandmasters instead. That's surely enough to deal with Caspian, right?" "Not now. Not even Darren could defeat Caspian with his guard down. I'm sure Caspian would be extremely cautious of our next moves. It would be troublesome if he had kept survivors and extorted information out of them. Then, are we just going to sit around and do nothing? Of course not. We'll help Darren secure the Black Moon Technique scroll. Once he learned how to wield his weapon with mastery, he would have a higher chance at defeating Caspian." Kelvin explained, "But we couldn't find it even since Tom had hidden the Black Moon Technique scroll." Jerry smiled. "Are you stupid? We just need to force Tom to tell us where he hid the scrolls. We might not be able to defeat Caspian, but Tom should be easy enough of a target. Besides, we also know that Miranda is a weak spot for Tom." "You're right. We can just kidnap Miranda and force Tom to give us the scroll. So what are you standing around for? Get to it already." Kelvin said, "I still have one question, Dad." Jerry folded his arms and replied, "Speak." "It'll take time for Darren to learn the Black Moon Technique." "No? That means we won't be able to deal with Caspian anytime soon. It won't be a problem. Caspian's just a civilian now. He won't be able to do anything that would disrupt our plans. We just need to make sure that he doesn't find out that we're plotting to kill him." Jerry's biggest worry was Caspian finding out his assassination plan. "I understand. I'll send someone to capture Miranda right away. Then I'll force Tom to give up the Black Moon Technique scroll.